morning. This is part 9 of a work in progress currently, titled Paths Taken. Procreate. Last time we visited, we were working in Procreate, and I was showing you how I was using that to help me in the design process. I've worked with it a lot since we last got together, and I'll show you what I've been doing. As you'll recall, just to review, I had this design. These lines were hand drawn on. I took a photo of that and imported it into Procreate. Excuse this reflection here. It's the light in the ceiling. So I brought that into Procreate and I started coloring on it. I've since learned more about layers, and I should have made a layer before I did anything, but I didn't. So I started coloring with the palette that I had created from the some of the Smalty that I'm going to use. And then I wanted to see, well, what about the darker shades? So at that point, I did what I should have done, and I created a new layer. Now let me show you what that layer looks like by itself. I ended up starting with the darker and going up, and I recolored a lot of that was already colored on the first image. So together they look like this. From there, I wasn't completely happy with the gradation, this area in here in particular, but I wanted to go ahead and get the lines in there a little better. So I created a layer on top called lines, and I just went in and traced over all the lines, the pieces, because I had been making adjustments. Now together, that's what that looks like, which I am then able to print out and use. So here we are. Then what I did was a cement layer. I called cement, which looks like this, which is just the cement edge, and I used like a medium gray and then a little bit lighter gray with a textured brush called clay, in effect. And it's a little subtle, but not bad for first try. So now I've got this. Then I thought I need to work on that gradation and see if I can improve it, because I'm not happy with it. I'm extremely challenged with this kind of thing, and it makes me kind of crazy. But I think I was able to improve it. So here's the layer, and let's take a look. I think I smoothed it out. What do you think? Well, this is where it is right now, and I think it will still need some tweaking, but I've got to get going. So I'm going to go with this and probably not do much more with it in Procreate. Things I learned that creating a palette in Procreate out of something like Smalty, it's just a whole different characteristic, the digital color. And in some ways it makes this kind of gradation more difficult, because the colors are more stark. There's just more, it's more stark between some of the values than what I think is going to look like, without the aliveness of the Smalty, the reflective quality. It's just a very flat and in some cases pretty stark difference. So I learned some things about color. It made me more sensitive to aspects of color, and particularly Smalty characteristics. So I also played around with the browns and decided I created a layer and then experimented with different amount of this speckled in brown, and I decided not to use the browns. So we'll just turn that one off. This process helped me. It made me think I needed more variation in my greens and in my values. So I have expanded the palette, the potential palette, I may not use all of these, but I've included some Mexican Smalty, a couple of C3s, just some others to give me possibility of more variation. And then I had to create a numbering system because this is from a variety of suppliers. And I numbered my jars according to that number system. And this is just part of my setup and how I'm trying to organize. So this did help me refine my palette. It helped me be more sensitive to color, and it reminded me of why I don't like to do this kind of thing, but for some reason I keep walking into it voluntarily. I'm not very good at it, but I keep trying. So my husband printed off the colored copy for me to scale. This will be a very good guide for me as I work. And I also had a couple of copies of these. I cut out all these shapes of things that are already glued onto my substrate, and then I was able to fit that on over these these already adhered pieces, and enabled me to draw on some guiding lines and a little bit of detail in some of the trickier kind of areas. So first I did clean up the substrate a little bit and painted a light gray. And this is really going to be very helpful. As you can see over here, I'm still making little modifications, tweaking areas that just stand out to me as looking a little congested. So always tweaking as I go. Over the weekend, I did get started in the darkest group of the darkest values, just following the pattern. The the kind of length of the pieces is not the same as here, and that's okay. I'm cutting ahead of time some of the bigger chunks, and so anyway, it's going pretty well. I think more smoothly than if I had not drawn all this in. We'll see in the final product how well I do. And as I said, the shading business is very challenging for me. Don't know why. But hopefully all of this work ahead of time, is going to pay off. And it'll be interesting to see what this looks like compared to that, and even the digital version on the iPad. So now I get to work. I'll touch base with you, when I have some progress and maybe some things to share. Until then, ciao.